Hey folks, JD here, and today we are just looking at the maintenance I've had to perform on this quadcopter and what my process is for taking off the propellers if they aren't marked to ensure that you put them all back on in the correct way. So let me just give you a bit of a rundown on this copter. This is the SYMA X5C. We looked at this quadcopter a couple of months back. We flew it in comparison with another SYMA as well. Found out that they were to be honest with you, they're pretty closely matched. And this still remains one of my favorites just because it's extremely simple to fly. Anybody can fly it, from beginner, intermediate and advanced. It's pretty quick, but it's not too fast. It's also got a camera, so you know that's your photography covered. And yeah, it's just overly fun. It hasn't got a lot of moving parts. It's not very large. It'll fit in any size of, pretty much any size of bag, so you can take it with you. Even the controller itself isn't huge. It's just your standard quadcopter controller, really. But I took this out a couple of months back. A couple of weeks back, I'm like. And I had an idea in my mind. I thought, right, okay, let's see how this goes. So I was going to film a little bit of footage and have this camera as my filming camera that I would talk to instead of having my head-mounted camera. And I had a couple of other ideas I was playing with as well. And I noticed that one of the propellers wasn't working, as well as it should. And it was this one here. Now, I don't know if you can see, but there, in the casing here, the motor housing, there's a tiny little crack right there. Let me see if I can move that into a bit of a better view for you. See the crack there? So there's not a crack on any of these other housings. So I basically called filming a day, came back, had a little look, tried to start her again, and in me taking her from the park, putting her in my bag and bringing her home, she had decided not to work. So it actually turned out that I needed to fix it. So I took the quadcopter apart. Normally it only requires a little bit of fixing, but this one required me to take the whole thing apart. Took the whole chassis off, dropped out the motor, just to find out that there's a tiny little bit of plastic in here that was pushing against the motor, and the motor wasn't sitting 100% straight. So therefore, when it was trying to spin, it couldn't actually spin the propeller correctly. So I just fixed it up, basically. That's all I did. But before I could take it apart, I had to get a couple of things straight in my mind to ensure that the things that I took off went back on in the correct order. So as you'll notice here, I've written some things on these propellers. We'll talk about those in a second. But first things first, before you take any propellers off, you have to be sure you know where the front of the quadcopter is, which way it's always going to face. Don't start working on it and then turn it around and have a little look at it, because you're gonna mess up the direction of the quadcopter. You're going to mess up the propellers going back on. It's not going to fly correctly, and it might do more damage than the worth of it. Now, I do feel as if I have to say that these quadcopters shouldn't really be needed to be taken apart. It probably will void your warranty. This one was out of warranty. It was one of the very first ones that I bought when I started this channel up. So I thought, well, there's no better time to learn than to test on this one. So basically I needed, just to rerun again, I needed just to get this bit of plastic off the motor just so that the propeller could spin. So what I did was, normally on these propellers you would have A or B denoting whichever propeller fits on what motor arm. So these don't have it, and there's no A or B on the arm either. So what I decided to do was I decided to mark these propellers AF, AB, and BF and BB. So AF is propeller A, front. AB is propeller A, back, because they always run in a straight line. So I know that one of these red markers and that blue marker there, these two, that would be propeller A, and this would be propeller B. So I marked it BF and BB, exactly the same, B front, B back. And that way I knew that if I had to take off more than just the one propeller, I would know which way to put them back on. I also put a little arrow on the quadcopter as well. Obviously, you do know which way the quadcopter is pointing, because if you put the quadcopter down, fortunately with the camera, whichever way the camera is pointing and the lens is at the front, that is the front of the quadcopter. But I didn't know, as I say, I didn't know how much I would have to remove from this copter, so I thought I'd put a little arrow there anyway, just to be on the safe side. It doesn't hurt. At the end of the day, if you're not going to sell it, it's just your quadcopter. The little bit of black marker there, it doesn't weigh anything. It isn't going to alter the flight pattern, and it isn't going to put too much stress on the motors. So, some of you may have noticed there's a little screw here. That's because I've already unscrewed and taken that propeller off. So, if I just bring this a little bit closer. So, what I noticed was this little bit of plastic here was pushing against everything on the inside. And when the propellers went to spin, you could hear this propeller was under a lot of strain. I don't just think from this plastic. I mean, what I have also done is taken off these screws here and the ones on the underside, and I've just cleaned it all from the inside as well, just to ensure that everything is working as it should. I put it all back together, and I just bent this plastic a little bit further back the opposite way, because this was bending in. And since doing that, I mean, I can very honestly say I can put the propeller back on, screw it on, and turn this transmitter on, and she will work. But as we've come this far, I think I'll show you what to do on the underside as well. So if you're new to flying quadcopters, or if you've flown them before, this may be familiar to you. So obviously you've got the LEDs at the back, LEDs at the front. You've got the little gear linkages as well, as I like to call them, which are open. So what you don't want to do is you don't want to put too much strain on these gears. So strain could be anything from holding your finger on it and pushing up on the transmitter, to landing the quadcopter in very long grass, trying to take off. Obviously, when this propeller spins, it'll try to take as much, it'll rip off as much grass as possible, whichever's blocking it. Then you've got yourself a bit of a problem. So what I like to do before I take any of my quadcopters out is I just like to make sure, if this little bit here is visible, I just want to make sure that I just hold the quadcopter in my hand and I just spin. If these two cogs here spin fine, then 9 out of 10 times there's going to be no obstruction. Obviously you don't want this being stiff. If it moves freely, just like this, then you'll find out that there is nothing blocking here and you should be free to go. Now, I carry sometimes a lot of quadcopters with me at any one time, ranging from nano quadcopters to larger quadcopters to your overly sized hexacopters as well in my bags. So one thing I do come across every now and again is I do come across little bits of hairs stuck in here. If you see a hair, don't think, oh, it's okay, it's only one. Get rid of it. Because if that hair manages to travel inside the quadcopter, maybe it won't damage anything that you can see. Maybe it'll damage something further on in. Maybe you might be one of the lucky ones, and it might not be, it might not damage. But you're really willing to take the chance with something that could be as expensive as a quadcopter or drone, whatever you want to call them. So yeah, as I say, before I take off, I just like to give them a little bit of movement just to ensure there's nothing blocking. Now, if there is something blocking, obviously with a lot of these quadcopters you get a little Phillips screwdriver anyway, I like to try and see if I can get out whatever I can. Don't use a cotton wool bud, because the cotton wool from the end of it is going to get stuck in the gears and that's going to cause you another mess of problems. So every now and again, just go through and just make sure that there's nothing there. If there is, try and see if you can get it out with something like a screwdriver, or even better, if you've got a small, like jeweler's glasses kit, you can use that, because you get small pliers, small tweezers, and things that might help you. Don't bend any of these cogs, because this large cog has got to connect this small cog in order for the propeller to work. Also, what you'll notice is on, I'd say, a good 90, if not 95% of quadcopters, on the arm, there's going to be a little arrow. Normally about here. If I can show you, there should be you might be able to see a little arrow there. So that shows you the direction in which the propeller moves. So if you've got something, or if you've just maintained your copter, cleaned it a little bit, it's pointless you moving the propeller that way if the propeller spins that way. You want to make sure that the way you move it is the way that the propeller spins anyway. That will show you that you have got, there's nothing clogged up in here, and you have got you are basically free to fly. So what I'll do, I'll flip her around. I'll put her facing back your way. Now, there's nothing special about putting this propeller on. Normally with some of them, the grooves have got to match, and if they don't, the propeller doesn't go on, it doesn't screw on. With this one, there's nothing like that. It's just a simple case of popping the propeller on, holding the propeller very, very delicately, and then just screwing it in. Sorry, I imagine you just see the top of my hand there. So yeah, when you tighten propellers on a quadcopter, you don't want to go whole, very ham-fisted and tighten everything. You just want to ensure that you tighten until it feels tight, and then half a turn. That way then you ensure that you have tightened it as much as you go into. You're not going to break any of the plastic, and above all, when you're flying, the propeller doesn't come off. Okay, now that we've put everything back together, we're just going to plug the battery back in. I'm going to just put a little bit of power through this quadcopter just to ensure that everything spins as it should and there's no more obstructions. So, needless to say, any repairs you do on any quadcopters, please don't forget to turn the power off, take the battery out. You don't need that for the repairs you're going to do. You can always put the battery back in and test once you're done. So, we're just going to hold the top of this. I've bound the transmitter to the quadcopter. Just give it a little bit of throttle. As you can see, all propellers are working as they should. So I'm very happy with that. I would be very happy to take that out and test and then take out for subsequent flights. So that's just a quick little look at what to do if you get something stuck in your propeller and you have to take off the propeller and in a way and you have no markings on the propellers, so you don't know which one goes where. So it's very simple. It's something that I would most definitely recommend to people to try. Just even if you've got one which you know isn't working, just mark it up. Make sure you mark the front of it, mark up the propellers, take her apart, be very, very careful. Obviously, remember, if you have only got a problem with one motor, then only look at that one motor. Be very careful if you have to take everything apart. There may be hidden wires or things you could damage. So obviously, that's doing that is entirely up to you. You know what's wrong with your quadcopter, and you know hopefully a little bit about electronics and a little bit about these guys before you start to open them up. So there we have it, folks. Thanks ever so much for watching and listening. I'll have a couple of other maintenance videos going up, as well as the unboxings and the flight tests. We're going to try and see if we can push production a bit more, get a few more videos out there. So until next time, my friends, don't forget to subscribe. If you haven't, click the little subscribe button. It's very much appreciated, and we really need the help. And so until next time, my friends, happy flying.